So my talk is titled From Critic to Convert, William Seward, the Erie Canal and the Making of a Political Identity. Why the Erie Canal? Well, this year is the 200th birthday of the completion of the Erie Canal, so we're all celebrating. So that led me and our Director of Education, Jeff, to create this talk to discuss William Seward and the canal. So like I said, I'm going to be talking about William Seward and his relationship with the Erie Canal, and how the ideas about the canal developed all the rest of his politics, his anti-slavery beliefs, his support of immigration, and his support for a growing, industrializing, west-moving United States. And just to give you a little bit of a roadmap for tonight, I'm just going to talk about his origins, how he got involved with the canal, and then how the canal became a foundation for his political beliefs, and go forward from there. So I hope you'll enjoy it, and I hope you won't ditch me. I had to, I'm sorry, okay. I'm sure that most of you have some idea of a familiarity with the Erie Canal, but I'm just going to give you guys a very quick recap so we're all on the same page. So what is it? It is a 363-mile artificial river from Albany to Buffalo that connected all of upstate New York and opened migration into the western states, western being Ohio and the upper Midwest. The canal was championed by this guy, DeWitt Clinton. It was sort of his brainchild. Started in 1817, finished in 1825. There have been various attempts to build a canal before that, so if you really look into canal history, you can see stuff going back all the way to the early 1700s with attempts to build a canal. But this guy is the one who made it happen. He first went to the federal government to try to get some money. They wouldn't give him any money, so he ended up going to the state government and funding it that way. So, William Seward, let me go back one, was a young man during the construction of this. Seward is born in 1801 in the Hudson Valley village of Florida. He's 16 when the canal starts, and about 24 when it's finished. So very young man. So obviously he didn't have a say in the big level politics of it, but it was affecting his upbringing here. So the title of this talk is From Critic to Convert. So William Seward began actually as a very strong critic of the Erie Canal. He was not into it as a child. I had said he was born in the Hudson Valley, and he was born under the thumb of his father, Samuel Sweezy Seward. There he is. They got the same nose. But his dad was very much a Jeffersonian, one of those political terms you throw around, a supporter of Thomas Jefferson. Basically, his dad believed that America should be agricultural, the government should be small, the government should not fund these big projects, should be limited in power and size. And these were ideas he passed down to his son, that the government should be small, should be out of the way, and it's really up to the states and up to private industry to fund big projects like this. So because of the influence of his dad, Seward did not think the Erie Canal was a very good idea. He followed his father's wishes and went to Union College in Schenectady, New York. And there was a young man involved in the political debates of the day. Seward was very anti-Erie Canal. He called himself a Madisonian, James Madison, the successor to Thomas Jefferson. And Seward said, "The big ditch has made so many proselytes here to the Clintonian creed that it is almost heresy to declare oneself a Madisonian." What does all that gobbledygook mean? He says, "A lot of people here in Schenectady like the Erie Canal. I don't like it, though. I think it's a bad idea," is basically what he's saying. A lot of his classmates, Schenectady's right at the start of the canal, are into the Erie Canal. He is not a fan. In the debate societies on college campus, he argues against the canal very aggressively. He said that it was an impossibility and it would financially ruin the state if it was constructed. So very much parroting the opinions of his father as a young man there in Union College. He continued his father's wishes. He trained to be a lawyer. He went down to New York City, and there he fell in with a political group known as, there's Seward at about 24 years old. Skinny guy, bright red hair, bright blue eyes, pretty short, 5'4", 5'5", very talkative, something that'll stay with him through the rest of his life. And there's the quote there about the heresy and the big ditch. So following his father's wishes, Seward moves to Manhattan, trains as a lawyer. He falls in with a political group known as the Bucktails. The Bucktails are led by this guy, Martin Van Buren, and they are the enemies of DeWitt Clinton. DeWitt Clinton, the father of the Erie Canal. So Seward found not only political opportunity with these Bucktails, but friendship and camaraderie. There's a barrel of porter at Tammany Hall, and the Bucktails are swigging it all the night long. In the time of my boyhood, 'twas pleasant to call for a seat and a cigar amid the jovial throng. So now Seward is not only hearing this from his father, he has peers, he has opportunities from this group of people who really dislike the Erie Canal. So it seems like he's going down an oppositional route. How could he change if all his friends, all the political opportunities he's getting are against the canal? Well, he had to see it for himself. A business opportunity and a personal opportunity of marriage takes him out here to Auburn, New York. By the time he sets out for Auburn, there are portions of the canal completed. It's not all completed just yet, but he can go quite a bit of the way from Utica to Weedsport on the Erie Canal. And as he travels down the canal on a boat much like this, he sees these new communities that are springing up along the Erie Canal, and it changes his mindset. He said that certain heavy scales fell from my eyes as I descended from the wharf, entered the packet boat that was to convey me 80 miles to Weedsport, with a landing place at Auburn. So he takes the canal. Certain heavy scales fell from his eyes. What does he mean there? He means revelation. I'm seeing things very differently. Oh no! On his way west, he saw these new canal towns that were popping up. Towns that were getting prosperity and opportunities that the canal was bringing. And he thinks, well, I see new farms. I see new opportunity for people who might have been stifled in the eastern part of the state. Maybe this isn't such a bad idea, after all. Now, he comes here to Auburn. He marries his wife, Frances Miller Seward, whose father constructed the Seward House Museum down the street there on 33 South Street. And when he gets married to Frances, he becomes part of the small but growing elite of Auburn. And all these elite, the Dills, the Hardenbergs, are all benefiting from the prosperity the canal is bringing. So this young man is now connected into another group, another social and political group, and is seeing the benefits it's bringing. And to make the point how he grew up with the canal, he's married in 1824, and the canal is dubbed fully complete the next year, almost a year later, in 1825. So it really grew along with him as a young man, so very much a child of the canal. Now Auburn, as I mentioned earlier, or as you probably know, is not part of the route on the Erie Canal. We're slightly south. The citizens here had actually petitioned for the canal to dip down and go to Auburn. The state prison had already been established here at this point, so the state sort of figured, you got the prison, you got enough, you got plenty. Also, geography-wise, the flatter ground through where the Montezuma swamps are was decided it would be easier to dig through that than the hilly territory sort of between here and Weedsport. So a combination of logistics, and you guys already got something from the state, so you're not going to get the canal here. But make no mistake, Auburn wanted to cash in essentially on the prosperity of the canal. When it was completed, they sent a delegation of citizens up to Weedsport. When the Seneca Chief, the boat that is traveling the length of the canal, went by to engage in the celebration with bonfires and fireworks. So Seward is now plugged in to this small elite of Auburn, and Auburn has canal mania at this point. There's all these different canals besides the Erie Canal springing up, things that are going north and south, and Auburn wants in on the action. They want to create the Auburn and Owasco Canal. They want to dig north from Owasco Lake up to Auburn, and then eventually up to the Erie Canal and Weedsport to connect Auburn directly to the Erie Canal. Through connections with his father-in-law, who's part of this town's elite, Seward is made as the secretary for this corporation trying to construct the Auburn and Owasco. Now, the businessmen of Auburn have huge dreams. It's not just connecting to the Erie Canal. We could also dig south, down from the south of Owasco Lake, connect to the Susquehanna, From there to the Chesapeake and Auburn will be at the center of this trade from the Erie Canal and up from the Chesapeake. Now we know this never actually happened, but this was the idea that anyone could get prosperity from the canals because they're seeing what's happening with the Erie Canal. So this is when Seward really starts drinking the canal Kool-Aid, as it were, getting really much on the side of canals. So at this point, Seward is also looking to get his own start in politics. He has a law practice here in Auburn. He's part of the small town's elite. And his opinions on his old pal Martin Van Buren and the Bucktails start to change. He wrote to his father that Van Buren's genius is sunk into cunning and chicanery. It also helped a little bit that DeWitt Clinton, father of the Erie Canal, was now governor of New York State. And Seward, who's looking to get into politics, thinks he might get an appointment from the governor. He visits Albany trying to get appointed as a Cayuga County surrogate, basically a judge. It doesn't happen, but at this point we're talking late 1820s. He's fully in on canals. He sees the opportunities it has brought to town and is now really starting to push for canals in his own right. So although he has a bit of a false start with his Cayuga County surrogate job, it doesn't go through. Shortly after, he becomes part of the New York State Senate, only 29 years old, so very, very young state senator. There's 32 people. He's the most junior and in the 7 of the minority. When he goes to Albany, one of the main things he starts fighting for are canals. He's completely done a 180. Now, we're talking about the 1830s now. The new issue of the day is what is called lateral canals. So, you know, the Champlain Canal, the Chenango Canal, the Black River Canal, connecting different parts of the state to the central Erie Canal. It's a way for different regions to get more economic opportunity. And as a young state senator, Seward is very behind these changes here. Now, very ambitious, at only 33 years old, Seward runs for governor of New York. As part of this new political party that's going to feature a lot, they're called the Whigs, not hair. And it was assigned they're against the tyranny of President Andrew Jackson. But the problem is they sprung up as we're against Andrew Jackson. What are they for? I don't know. And the Whigs don't really know. They know we don't like him, but there's all sorts of people who have different ideas. And so, as a Whig candidate for governor, Seward is now trying to articulate, what does it mean to be a Whig? We know what we're against, but what are we for? What are we trying to do? And in this campaign, he makes canals the central part of this campaign. He said that I am and have ever been the advocate of the system of internal improvements, remember that, internal improvements by means of railroads and canals. I regard it as one of the most important duties of the government, as fast as its rapidly developing resources will allow, to prosecute such a system of improvements. So he's basically saying, what my dad believed as a kid, that government should be small and stay out of it, is wrong. We as the government, as the Whig Party, have a duty to improve the lives of our citizens. That improvement I saw when I was going west from Utica to Auburn, these new villages popping up, I want to continue that prosperity through more programs like the canals. He's trying to use the government in the positive way. And this idea of improvement, starting first with physically improving canals, building more, doing more, would become the central bedrock of the rest of his politics, that we can improve and make things better. Didn't go well for him first time. He lost by nearly 11,000 votes. Part of it was his youth. He's 33, and his opponent, William Marcy, of Mount Marcy, Adirondacks fame, Seward loses. But he doesn't give up. He decides, okay, I've lost, I'm down, but I'm not out. What does he do? He moves from Auburn to Westfield in Chautauqua County for a little bit to serve as a land agent. This is partially monetary-wise. He thinks he's going to get some dough for doing this. But also, he wants to shore up his political positions in the western part of the state. He wants to go out there, boots on the ground, and really make his case. He knows the sort of downstate Hudson Valley corridor is probably going to be lost to him. They're not really interested in funding the canal. They're reaping the benefits. They don't really need more funding for Western canals. Why would they care? They've already got their benefits. So he's like, okay, kind of a lost cause here, but I can pick up some support out here. Now the canal basically goes right here. Chautauqua County is far in the west and far in the south. The canals bypass that. At this point, mid-1830s, it's still rough out there. You know, rough roads, the settlements are rough around the edges, and this really reinforces in Seward's mind, seeing the rough settlements at Chautauqua, what the government needs to be doing. He sees that, okay, it's really rough around the edges out there, so you know what we need? We need this idea of improvement, and that really solidifies his ideas that government projects like canals, roads, and bridges should be used to improve the lives of the citizens. Around the same time, he also keeps trying to push for the Auburn and Owasco Canal, which ultimately stalls that Susquehanna link. The other important thing he saw out in Westfield was lack of schools and lack of education. And that adds another piece to the puzzle for him. Okay, I'm supporting canals, I'm supporting roads, I'm supporting bridges. That will bring people there and make their physical lives better. But what about their mental lives? What about their moral lives? Well, it stands to reason, if we can improve the physical structure, canals, roads, bridges, we can also improve the mental infrastructure by building and funding more public schools. So that adds another block to the building block of his politics that started with the idea of canals. 4 years later, he's back for a rematch. This time, he defeats William Marcy, this time winning by about 10,000 votes. So he turns the table. Once again, canals were at the center of his campaign. And Seward is the first governor since DeWitt Clinton to not be part of the bucktails of the William Marcy party. So this is a new dawn. He thinks, okay, we're going to really get some stuff done now that I'm governor. He lays out a very ambitious inaugural address. He wanted to, by this point, you, sir, told me earlier that he's a little bit after the canals, so this, you're absolutely correct. At this point, he's governor. Canals have been around 10-ish years. The Erie Canal has been going well, but he thinks, okay, I can make it better. I can improve it. The canal should be widened from 40 feet to 70 feet, deepened from 4 feet to 7 feet. Allow bigger boats, allow more boats. We have these locks to change elevation. Right now, they're only single locks. Well, we got boats going west and boats going east. We got a traffic jam. We need to make double locks to allow boats to flow both ways on the canal. So he wants to improve the infrastructure of the existing canal and build more. The problem is, he won the governorship, they won the state legislature, they didn't win the state senate. So things are getting gummed up in the state senate. His opponents are saying that enlarging the canal is impractical. It'll bankrupt the state. It's irresponsible. So he really runs into a lot of stall tactics for this. Another thing he wanted to do was increase oversight in the canal commissioners, aka the guys who are going along, monitoring the locks, taking the tolls. A lot of corruption in those positions. He wanted to be able to have an independent board of oversight for that. He can't really achieve any of this. So the terms of the governor were only 2 years back then. So 1840, Seward's in for another challenge. And just again to show you how big of an issue the canals were back then, the opposition party, the Democrats, ran this guy, William C. Bouck, who was a very popular canal commissioner. That's how he got his fame. And I just have to digress for a second. His nickname was White Horse Bouck, one of those strange 19th century nicknames. That was because of the white horse he would ride up and down the canal as he was expecting. I don't know. Strange nicknames back then. But anyway, Bouck's candidacy shows how much the canals were still important. They were trying to show the Democrats, the opposition party, it's not the canal we have a problem with, it's just you're trying to do too much. Bouck ends up losing, Seward wins another term. But things only get worse in his second term. He can't make these things go. He can't make his canal improvements go. And unfortunately for Seward, for the first time in about 20 years, all work stalls on the canal. The state refuses to fund more improvements. He is fuming. He says, for the first time in a quarter of a century since the ground was broken for the Erie Canal, the governor of the state of New York, in meeting with the legislature, finds himself unable to announce the continued progress of improvement. The other indignity for Seward, he was trying to create a memorial for DeWitt Clinton, the father of the canal, who ended up dying in poverty. Seward could not get the legislature to pass a resolution to fund a monument for DeWitt Clinton, which was like another slap in the face to Governor Seward. So Seward then leaves the governorship in 1842. Didn't achieve everything he wanted to, but still fairly disappointed. Now, the 1840s is usually the start of the time we start to recognize and pay attention to Seward in the mainstream popular sort of consciousness as he works as a U.S. Senator, works his way up to Lincoln's Secretary of State. But at this point, he's out of office. The railroads are starting to come through, starting to supplant the canals. What comes next? Well, before he's doing anything else, relax a little bit with the family. The canal is there too. He uses the canal as a teaching device for his children. This is a book called The Adventures of Marco Polo, Travels on the Erie Canal. It was a children's book. It was like an adventure book, a moral lesson book disguised as an adventure book. So this young boy is traveling along the canal and he's learning, don't trust swindlers. He's learning how a lock works. It was a gift to Seward's young son, Will. But the idea of using the canal as a tool to teach and talk about what William Seward believes would continue in his political career. He used the canal basically as a club to show that his way was right and that the ambitious policies that one time seemed impossible. We could never build a 363-mile canal. We did. Check it out. So he uses the canal as a way to prove what he's thinking is the right way to go. Well, he's U.S. Senator and Secretary of State. He uses this tool to help him. So what do I mean by this? Let's take a step back and talk about how William Seward made speeches. When Seward's making speeches, one of his favorite styles is to give the history of the event he's talking about, but not always the perfectly true and unbiased history. The history according to William Seward. So, for example, the Erie Canal was a hotly debated topic, but in Seward's Notes on the State of New York, his History of New York State, he said that DeWitt Clinton enjoyed the spectacle of a free people rejoicing and prosperity increased and national harmony confirmed. So he liked to lay out his version of history and then use the canal from there. So I mentioned before that he uses the canal to say what once seemed impossible is now possible. One example of this is his support of immigration. Seward was a lifelong supporter of immigration, Irish immigration, Chinese immigration. He saw new immigrants as a way to settle and improve the land that could benefit from the prosperity of these new schools and canals and settle along these routes and improve their lives. There's a lot of prejudice against the Irish at the time, and as a way to show his support, Seward uses the canal. I remember that in DeWitt Clinton's time, the Erie Canal was then stigmatized as the Irish ditch, because you had Irish immigrants digging the ditch. And in response to that, Seward said, we should have preserved that designation and now confess that for the benefits of mankind that the Erie Canal, its numerous far-reaching veins and arteries, all railroads, harbors, fortifications were chiefly constructed by hardy, light-hearted, joyous, liberty-loving immigrants from Ireland. So here's the move he's pulling here. Not only is the canal, this great thing, was made possible by Irish immigrants, it's that we should be thanking these Irish immigrants for helping us build the canal. So he's linking something you already like, the canal, to something you might not like, Irish immigration, and say we can't have one without the other. So he's really using it, again, to build those building blocks of saying what he's supporting. The next thing, canals and anti-slavery. Now, it seems like those things couldn't mesh at all, and Seward's anti-slavery politics are what launched him into the national stage, what made him almost the president of the United States in 1860. Now, he uses the canals as a tool to show, look how much infrastructure we have, and look how little the slave states have. This is going to be a long quote, but I think it's worth it to make his point. The experience of New York tells the whole argument against slavery's extension, the whole argument for universal freedom. Suppose that 50 years ago, New York, like Virginia and Maryland, had clung to slavery. Where now would have been these 3 million composites of free men? Where then would have been the Erie Canal, the Genesee Valley Canal, the Oswego Canal, the Seneca and Cayuga Canal, the Crooked Lake Canal, the Chemung Canal, the Chenango Canal, the Black River Canal, the Champlain Canal? He listed all of those. He did. Imagine listening to that speech. Anyway, where the New York Central Railroad, where your inventors of steamboats, electrical telegraphs, planing machines, where your artists, where your 20 cities, where above all the merry, laughing agricultural industry of native-born and exotic laborers, enlivening the whole broad coast and the lake coast of the ocean side. Go ask Virginia, go even ask noble Maryland to show you her people, her canals, railroads, universities, schools, charities, commerce, cities, cultivated acres. Her silence is your expressive answer. He's saying here, look at what the canal and free wage labor has brought us here in the North. It's brought schools, it's brought prosperity, it's brought infrastructure. They have none of that in the South because they're dependent on slave labor. This is also tied to his idea of improvement, the idea that we could improve the moral status of the country by ending slavery, and the ending of slavery would lead to physical improvements in the South, canals, roads, bridges, schools. And Seward tried to show how much better off the North was because it was free. In fact, he said the canal was unleashing a flood of freedom. The immigrants who had gone to those new Midwestern states, Illinois, Iowa, Michigan, lands that had never known slavery, he said that these immigrants, these people who went west, would be the key to ending slavery, all unleashed by the Erie Canal. So, at this point, gets us up to the Civil War era. Seward, during the Civil War, didn't really have much time for canals as Secretary of State. They were sort of on the way out as well. The Erie Canal was much less prominent in New York State. The railroads were here. More different transportation routes were here. But he still harbored a love of canals in the back of his mind. As the Civil War was over, Seward turned his eyes to Panama and the Panama Canal. He really tried to negotiate. There he is in the middle, negotiating the idea of the Panama Canal. It ended up failing in the Colombian State Senate there in the Colombia, the country. But he was trying. It proves it was still on his radar. After his time as Secretary of State, he travels around the world, where canals are a big part of his tourism. The Suez in Egypt, the Imperial Canal in China. He sees it. He writes about it. So that brings us to the end of Seward's life. What was the point of all of this? The canals were the bedrock of his politics. By first wanting to improve the canal, he then built on that with ideas of improving other parts of the nation, improving education with more public schools. And if we can improve people's education, why not go bigger and fight for a larger moral improvement by fighting against slavery? All these politics of improvement can be connected back to the bedrock of his beliefs in the Erie Canal. He saw it as a massive accomplishment, a huge point of pride for his native state. And I'll wrap up on this quote, really summing up Seward's pride in what the canal had achieved for New York State. after a lapse of 2,000 years, and the ravage of repeated revolutions, when the records of history shall have been obliterated, the tongue of tradition converted, the shadowy remembrance of even ancient events to childish tales of miracle, this national work, the Erie Canal, shall remain, bearing testimony to the genius, learning, industry, and intelligence of the present age. And that is it.